I don't want you to be stuck because you've made the wrong decisions. And now we have new priorities for this new meta, so we need to update this tier list. Big thank you to my Discord cloud and casual players who have consulted within these changes, especially Shazam's data. And without further ado, let's get into it. In this video, we're gonna go over the changes bottom up and then we'll place the new heroes. But first, let's go over the updated tiers because some people still don't understand what they mean. The tier names are the signature item priority alongside the hero viability. So for example, if you take here, this is gonna be underwhelming signature items for meta heroes. The one exception to this rule would be niche carving signature items. Niche carving signature items I move up to better reflect their priorities. These are signature items that enable heroes to do something they otherwise wouldn't, and so they make a very big difference on hero identity even on the lower tiered heroes, which is why they're so far. This tier list is campaign based. I mean, I have no doubt that Solo as a signature item, for example, is huge in PvP, but in campaign it's not as big, and this is what this tier list ranking is based on. I also occasionally talk about the benchmark, which is the key points you want to hit. If you want full benchmark list, check out the original video description, and let's get started. Now, starting off with the underwhelming bracket, we have 3 changes that I really want to address. First one would be Rigby. Rigby is going to be moving up. The reason is that his signature item gives him a very key stun, and he's not used often in campaign, but this plus 30 is a 4-second stun that could be an AoE. He's still underwhelming, but we see him in other modes. Like for example, we see him in Abyssal, we see him in PvP, so he's one of those heroes you want to keep an eye out for, and he deserves this higher slot if he ever works in campaign. We also have 2 big move ups for Oscar and Citrana. What can I say? They're both seeing usage and success. We know that from the data. Both Oscar counter invade and Citrana cheat death damage mitigation are very unique abilities. They both find themselves used a lot in the very end game at high investment. So if you look at Oscar and Citrana, they're both gonna move up no less than 3 tiers because these are now average heroes in the end game. Next one would be Rain. Now Rain, I also want to move up 3 tiers, and the reason is her rework. Her signature item still leaves some to be desired, but when you look at Rain, you know, she's much better than she used to be, and she was seeing some range usage before, which is beyond me. So I bet she's gonna see some usage now, and I think she's one of those heroes to keep an eye for as an average hero. Still, signature item not the big part about it, that's gonna be the furniture. Next, I want to talk about 7 heroes that are on the average bracket. There's a lot of changes in the middle. Scrap is gonna move up 1 tier. The reason for that is while his plus 30 SI does not synergize with his burst usage perfectly, keep in mind that the Sandstorm condition is an ability that's very easy to trigger. Having it in the endgame helps Aaron secure wins against very tanky targets because the damage here scales on the enemy HP, which is very good to warrant 1 move up. Belinda is gonna move down 3 tiers. Don't get me wrong, it's not that she's bad, it's just that her SI doesn't help her endgame usage, which is going to be the crit buff and win sets, but even her crit buff is really easy to substitute. You see those new heroes getting buffed like Rain, you see strong heroes like Lorsan. It's not that she's completely bad, it's that I don't see any reason to invest into her for the endgame anymore with so many other strong heroes, especially with a signature item that's completely mismatched with the hero usage itself. Brutus is going to move up 1 tier, and this is one that I see from many different replays. Having the plus 20 on a signature item extending his last cast is actually pretty useful for his endgame consistency. You see him used with some fragile carry sets, you see Damon or Khazard, he's seeing some usage, and apparently the signature item could improve him, so a decent one to keep in mind for you endgame players. Now, Lucius and Anarchy, they're not going down, but we need to have a talk. People are not using them. I really like the fact that Lucius can dispel with his SI, and I really like how Anarchy can scale and recover a lot, but we don't see them both used. Now, they're not going down, but I wanted to mention them because if we're going to keep seeing them not finding any usage and just not fitting on those campaigns outclassed by other heroes, we might see them drop down 1 tier and maybe even 3 tiers as well in the future. And now we're going to move to the top part of this wish list, which is going to be very dynamic. 8 heroes to address. Now, Nora barely moves up. I stand by what I said when I placed her in her original placing. She can be used only for her CC, in which case the signature item does not do much, but recently she's seeing a lot more use for her damage, which makes her early butchery sometimes worthwhile, more consistent. And the one thing that really tips the scale for me is the fact that her signature item gives her haste, which has a lot of utility in it, also giving a minute indirect buff to her CC, making it a good return on investment, moving her up overall. Sophia is gonna move down. Now I'm gonna explain this one. Yeah, I saw those clutch replays of her staying alive the whole fight and pulling off 1v1s and with stunts. However, she moves down for 3 reasons. First is how she's seeing less use in endgame campaign. Second is how her endgame transition to being more commonly a support hero doesn't synergize with what her SI does. And third is how slow this thing is. It takes more than 1 ult, it sometimes can take more than 2 until the plus 30 takes effect, with taking such a big investment. I just don't think she justifies it fighting with other heroes in this tier that are also going to be seeing some movement. So first let's talk about Mihira. Mihira is not going to change, but remember, plus 30 gives her extra energy for the health recovered, and she recovers a lot, making the god comp so much more prominent. The campaign is her strong suit where she can go into many different teams too. Definitely try drape on her to let her recover more energy with her signature item, making her so much more consistent, pulling off these ults typically in the god comp. Aaron's gonna be moving up 2 tiers, and we're gonna talk about it, but this guy's obviously just mad. His benchmarks at 1 in 30 cause him to freeze enemies, the CC being huge for the way he maintains control consistently to deal his damage. So he's just one of those carries that carries you from the mid game, early game to the very late game, still completely relevant, and the signature item benchmarking at 1 in 30, giving him this extra CC is making him so much more consistent in the way he maintains control to deal his damage. For similar reasons, we're going to see Gwyneth moving up. Gwyneth, despite a slight fall in usage, she's still one of the best 5 carries in the game, making her a necessary hero to invest in. Plus 20 gives her a shadow clone, but my viewers at the channel know that her true benchmark is going to be 25, where she gets extra haste that's so important on her. Cecilia, and in this one we're going to have a talk, she falls down to average for average. Now, here's the reason. We saw her in the early meta in some god comps in chapter 35, and I was convinced the reason is her signature items give energy, which enables Aziz, the god comp, and all of that. Now, this is partially the case, but I was missing in how an invest in furniture plus 9 was doing a big part of the work. For those of you that don't know, it's horribly mistranslated. The actual effect maker all triggers on 2 enemies, and the signature item does not have a big effect alongside herself, just not being the most viable hero. So she takes a big fall down to average for average. Good signature item, but just does not completely synergize with the defense, and if you use her for a carry, she's just not the best carry there is out there. Gorvo, and this is another one that's sadly falling down all the way to average for average, and we need to talk about this for a second. What stood out to me when I placed him where I did is the plus 10, which buffs shield efficiency. Sadly, that's another terrible mistranslation. He only buffs his own shield, making his signature item less worth the investment. It's just sad the signature item on this turtle is just not as good as we thought it is. And for the last movement, we're going to have Kazid. Now, this is going to be perhaps a hot take, and Justin's going to hate me for this, but he's going to drop to niche carving. And this is a very special case. We haven't had that in the past. Let me explain. I know how he's a carry is his consistent usage. I know he's fragile. I know he needs the stats, but I'd argue in the endgame sets he could be used as a side carry. Now, we see him sometimes as a side carry alongside people like Source and Athalia. There, the role just needs to land the storm and let them carry. Surely in the Gwyneth sets, you really enjoy the freeze on him, but just having the storm up that triggers when enemies go below a certain HP threshold is just so useful. The plus 30 gives him unique team-wide CC buff that's niche that we wouldn't otherwise have, but it's no longer required, and that he does see usage even without signature item investment. Look, the CC buff is a very specific niche that's just carved by the SI rather than a meta hero that's being defined all on its own. Now onto the most interesting part of this video, let's talk about those new heroes. Ainz and Albedo are both going to be those heroes that fit into niche carving signature items. And I think you both know what I have to say here. Their signature items make them do what they do. The plus 30 damage bonus fast cast fallen down is necessary and huge. As we've said in this challenge before, so is Albedo's dimensional buff benchmarking plus 30. It really makes them who they are. Like with and without their signature items, they're completely different heroes. Scaling on Ainz more similar to Sophia. Albedo doesn't stand out as much. Lucretia is another one I want to talk about that also goes in niche carving SI. Her SI is what buffs her when her allies die, enabling her to pull off the Lucretia cheese comps in the campaign that we sometimes see. Now in the endgame, there are amazing wins that she sometimes pulls. She's not the most consistent, but the SI is what enables her to do what she does. So a good investment for a niche carving signature item. Zafra is one we've talked about on this channel. His SI gives him 720% scanning, interrupting basics and an extra cloud, benchmarking at +1, placing him in average SI for meta heroes. Very strong, but he's he's not that type of a hero. You just have to have his SI to work. His finisher is also very interesting, the stuns on it. You can see him benefit a lot as a carry, and he does demand investment, but he's on the same tier I feel like Mihira, where she has a very strong signature item, but he's still strong without it, not completely required and necessary or niche carving per se. Throwing up next, her signature item inflicts her curse onto enemies, allowing him to deal true damage to them. Mad stuff. This also has the potential to be good, but throwing herself is just too weak, which makes this average for underwhelming heroes. Just can't use this enough, even though the true damage is interesting. Just puts her down for now. Peepa signature item, and this is one we gotta talk about. I had a video, check it out, description below. Fire additional orbs, give her ally immunity for 5 seconds, and make her acorn ability consistent. It builds Peepa on so many different sides. I would say the plus 20 is the benchmark. That's very synergistic, and a signature item niche carving. So much on one signature item, so many good things that really make that hero who she is, and I think we really have to experiment with her, but a signature item is going to be very crucial if you want to make her work, and I think she's going to fit in there. Quick editorial catch on this one. Almost is moving down 3 tiers. While he's rarely seen in those Khazad set, he just does not justify picking enough. He has those good shields, would like to see him used, but just not a good hero to invest in his current state. Now, the way I have to summarize this tier list if we see all these recent changes is that the meta is changing. The middle part is the tier list is becoming thinner, with many awesome heroes introduced, as well as power creep slowly sneaking into AFK arena. This is one thing I really hope the devs notice, so that the game really develops into its full potential. I really want this to succeed. I want the strategy to be in there. Like and subscribe so the algorithm picks up on this awesome video, and I've been Linker. Thank you and peace.